Okay, so following on from the video where we were looking at these 14 topics, and we were looking at attitude in study mode, we're now going to swap over or pop over into practice mode and have a look at the same subject, same topic, which is attitude, and have a go at doing this. We'll do it together. So we'll start off with this. So what type of emergency vehicle is fitted with a green flashing beacon? So is it fire engine, is it ambulance, is it road bridge, or is it doctor's car? So we could say, we could knock out those two, couldn't we? Because they would be blue lights, wouldn't they? So we're looking at either a green flashing beacon for either a road gritter or a doctor's car. So I think even if you didn't know it was doctor's car, you could reasonably say, because it's not going to be a road gritter, couldn't you? Let's have a look at this. A green flashing beacon on a vehicle means the driver or passenger is a doctor on an emergency call. Give way to them if it's safe to do so. Be aware that the vehicle may be travelling quickly or may stop in a hurry. We'll just pop onto here and see emergency vehicles and incident support vehicles. You should look and listen for ambulances, fire engines, police, doctors, or other emergency services using flashing blue, red, or green lights and sirens, or flashing headlights, or traffic officer and incident support vehicles using flashing amber lights. When one approaches, do not panic. Consider the route of such a vehicle and take appropriate action to let it pass while complying with all traffic signs. This includes, by the way, if you're the lead car at a red traffic light, when it says complying with all traffic signs, if you do have an emergency vehicle behind you, it doesn't give you the right to go through that stop line to try and help them to come through. So just bear that in mind. You can make attempts to move over to the left, but you don't have any defence to go through the red traffic light. If necessary, pull to the side of the road and stop, but try to avoid stopping before the brow of a hill, a bend or narrow section of road, because you would then be creating a hazard there when the emergency vehicle tries to go around you. It's going to be blind, and oncoming vehicles wouldn't see them, and they may not see the oncoming vehicles. Do not endanger yourself, other road users or pedestrians, and avoid mounting the curb. Do not brake harshly or approach to a junction or roundabout, as a following vehicle may not have the same view as you. This is worth, emergency service drivers don't really want people to be panicking, and you do see this actually where people, not learners, just generally, people are doing rather odd things to get out of the way, mounting curves and things like that. It is just good practice to put a signal on to indicate to the emergency service driver that you've seen them, and then gently pulling over without actually mounting the curb. And the little thing that I do say is, if you hear emergency services before you've spotted them in your central mirror, you're probably not doing enough observations. You should see blue lights before you hear two tones. Generally speaking, that should tell you that you're making frequent enough observations, just a general rule. Let's move on to the next. Who should obey diamond-shaped traffic signs? Now, these are rather odd ones because we don't really see many of these, do we? This isn't something that you would come across very often, and that in itself is a bit of a clue if you're looking at something that's not very common. So let's disregard this one for a minute. Lorry drivers, well, our lorry drivers like to see that. Our bus drivers, our taxi drivers, can you say you've seen this too often? And the reason why we're not is because it's for the tram drivers. Just explain the answer. These signs apply only to tram drivers. You should know their meaning so that you're aware of the priorities and are able to anticipate the actions of the driver. Let's pop onto here. Highway code: you must not enter a road, lane, or other route reserved for trams, Take extra care where trams run along the road. You should avoid driving directly on top of the rails, and should take care where trams leave the main carriageway to enter the reserved route to ensure you do not follow them. The width taken up by trams is often shown by tram lanes marked by white lines, yellow dots, or by a different type of road surface. Diamond-shaped signs and white light signals give instructions to tram drivers only. Moving on. What should you do if a vehicle pulls out in front of you at a junction? So, do we swerve past it and sound the horn? Do we slow down and be ready to stop? Do we flash our headlights and drive up close behind? Or do we accelerate past it immediately? So let's just try and do this logically. Okay, so what do you do if a vehicle pulls out in front of you at a junction? So that's a hazard, yeah? Something that's pulling out in front of you at a junction. Do we accelerate when we come up with junctions, hazards such as that? Unlikely, isn't it? Flashing your headlights, well, what's the use of flashing your headlights? That's to let people know that you are there. So that bit there is okay, but then it says, and drive up close behind. Do we want to be driving up close behind? Probably not. That discounts those two. So we're then left with these two. Swerve past it and sound your horn. Well, that's got sort of touch of aggressiveness about it, hasn't it? Because you're swerving as well. Is that something we want to be doing? Swerving past these? Do we slow down and be ready to stop? So out of those two, yeah, this is looking good, isn't it? Slow down and be ready to stop. You know, if you're swerving past something and sounding your horn, that looks like sounds like you're doing things that's again, sounding your horn and the headlights are to warn people of your presence, whereas that's got more of an aggressive kind of feel to it. So, boom, explain the answer. Try to anticipate what other drivers might do. Look and plan ahead so that you're ready to respond safely if a hazard develops. Be tolerant of road users who make mistakes. So let's pop onto the highway code. Be considerate, be careful of and considerate towards all types of road users, especially those requiring extra care. Remember we talked through this, didn't we, on the study video. So have a look at that again if you need to. On a road where trams operate, which vehicles will be the most at risk from the tram rails? So again, this is rather sort of location specific of how much knowledge you've got of these tram rails here. So we're looking at cars, buses, lorries, or cycles. Well, you know, the nature of the cycles with the thinner wheels means that there is more likelihood of them going into the rails. So yeah, that's quite a specific thing, you know, whether you know that through where you live and whether that's. Let's have a look. The narrow wheels of a bicycle can become stuck in the tram rails, causing the cyclist to stop, suddenly wobble, or even lose balance altogether. The tram lines are also slippery, which could cause a cyclist to slide or fall off. Let's have a look at the highway code. All road users, but particularly cyclists and motorcyclists, should take extra care when driving or riding close to or crossing the tracks, especially if the rails are wet. You should take particular care when crossing the rails at shallow angles, on bends and at junctions. It is safest to cross the tracks directly at right angles. Other road users should be aware that cyclists and motorcyclists may need more space to cross the tracks safely. Moving on. Why is it dangerous to travel too close to the vehicle ahead? Okay, so we talked about in the study video, we talked about the separation gap. Only a full break's 2 second rule. So 2 seconds in the dry, 4 seconds in the wet. And why are we even thinking about this? Let's have a look. Your engine will overheat. So why is it dangerous to travel too close to the vehicle behind? Because our engine will overheat. Doubtful. Your view of the road ahead will be restricted. Very much so. Your mirrors will need adjusting. Doubtful. Your sat nav will be confused. Doubtful. So if you just look at that in terms of process of elimination again, it is this one, isn't it? The closer we get to vehicles in front of us, our vision is restricted. Tailgating is the term used when a driver or rider follows the vehicle in front too closely. It's dangerous because it restricts your view of the road ahead and leaves no margin, safety margin, if the vehicle in front needs to slow down or stop suddenly. Tailgating is often the underlying cause of rear-end collisions or multiple pile-ups. Very, very common, these rear-end collisions. Just means you're driving too close to the vehicle behind, the vehicle in front of you. And generally speaking, at night time in the dark, if your headlights are lighting up the rear registration plate of the vehicle in front, you're driving too close to it. So just come back a little bit further. Just as a general kind of rule, that is. But yeah, 2-second rule, separation gaps. Moving on, which type of crossing allows cyclists to ride across while pedestrians are also crossing? So here we go, we've got the toucan, pelican, puffin, or zebra. So zebra crossings is the ones with the black and white crossing for pedestrians, isn't it? Puffin crossings and pelican crossings are the old ones with the when you press the button, the stop light comes on and it's a flashing amber light. The pelican crossings. The puffin crossings are the red man, so that's pedestrians only. So that leaves toucan. Always think of this as two can cross, TWO, two can cross, meaning cyclists and pedestrians. Yeah, TWO can. So let's go to toucan. And a toucan crossing is designed to allow pedestrians and cyclists to cross at the same time. Look out for cyclists approaching the crossing at speed. Yes, good point. Highway code. Oh, here we go. Lovely. Toucan crossings are light controlled crossings which allow cyclists and pedestrians to share the crossing space and cross at the same time. They're push button operated. So down here, in this little bit here, you'll have a red man as well as a red bicycle, and it will change to green. They both go green when it's time to cross. Pedestrians and cyclists will see the green signal together. Cyclists are permitted to ride across. Okay, so toucan, pedestrians and cyclists. Moving on. What will happen if you follow this vehicle too closely? So this is linked to what we just had earlier on. Our brakes aren't going to overheat, are they? Nor's the engine. The fuel consumption won't be increased, will it? But yes, definitely the view is reduced. The closer you get to the lorry, you often see on these lorries a sign that says, if you can't see my mirrors, meaning the side mirrors on the side of the cabin of the lorry, if you can't see my mirrors, I can't see you. So you always want to be giving yourself plenty of room, space between you and big vehicles like this, because so that you're improving your vision, so that you can see further up ahead up the road. And also another little by thingy of that is that with these big vehicles, lorries, come bigger wheels, bigger tires, and they pick up more grit and small stones. And if they don't have adequate guards on the wheel guards, then it's very easy for those small stones to flick up, and that can very easily crack your windscreen. So yeah, the answer to this is to do with the view, but there's more practical reasons as well why you wouldn't want to be close to these vehicles. But let's see explain the answer. Staying back will increase your view of the road ahead. This will help you to see any hazards that might occur and give you more time to react. Let's just look at the highway code now. Large vehicles can block your view. Your ability to see and to plan ahead will be improved if you pull back to increase your separation distance. Be patient, as larger vehicles are subject to lower speed limits than cars and motorbikes. Many large vehicles may be fitted with speed limiting devices which will restrict speed to 56 miles per hour, even on a motorway. If you find yourself driving behind a larger vehicle which is driving slower because of speed limitations, and it's a single carriageway road, this is a single carriageway road because there's just one lane in each direction. Dual carriageway roads have got something in the middle, haven't they? It doesn't matter how many lanes there are in between, but there's something permanent in the middle. That means it's two roads, dual carriageway, whereas this is single carriageway. So overtaking a vehicle like this is very, very potentially very hazardous, and you need to ensure that there's no junctions and there's nothing coming. Your vision is good before you commit yourself to overtaking something like this. You'd normally edge towards the right, so make sure that you can see very far up in front of you before you even look to be overtaking a vehicle like this. But yeah, I just wanted to bring up, single carriageway roads, one lane in each direction, and there's no pressure on you whatsoever to feel like you have to try and overtake that slower moving vehicle. If you're not comfortable and confident in doing that, just give yourself plenty of gap here. So if there's anyone behind you, they don't have to try and overtake you as well as the lorry. They can just come in here and then they overtake that when the time's good for that as well. So yeah, don't feel any pressure that you feel like you must overtake that vehicle, slow moving vehicle. You're approaching a red light at a puffing crossing. Pedestrians are on the crossing. When will the red light change? When you start to edge forward onto the crossing. So, do red lights change at crossings when you start to edge forward? They don't, do they? When the pedestrians push the button on the far side of the crossing, when the pedestrians have cleared the crossing, when a driver from the opposite direction reaches the crossing. So I think we can discount those two, can't we? Because it's got nothing to do with the drivers and when they start coming up to the crossings. So when the pedestrians push the button on the far side of the crossing, well, that's the pushing of the button is the thing that actually triggers you, to go on the red light in the first place, isn't it? So it's not that. So it should be this one here. When the pedestrians have cleared the crossing. Remember, these puffing crossings are clever ones. They've got little cameras on the top of the poles that detect when pedestrians are present. So that the tech-wise, they're slightly better, these puffing crossings. So yes, when it's cleared the crossing, that is correct. So let's explain the answer on that. A sensor will automatically detect that the pedestrians have reached a safe position. Don't drive on until the green light shows and it's safe for you to do so. So let's just look at the highway code on that. So toucan, puffin, and equestrian horses. Toucan is the one where pedestrians as well as cyclists are crossing. These are similar to pelican crossings, but there is no flashing amber phase. No flashing amber phase, because that's the one that happens on the pelican crossings with the flashing amber. The light sequence for traffic at these three crossings is the same as at traffic lights. If the signal controlled crossing is not working, proceed with extreme caution. Just going back to pelican crossings, this is the one where it goes from a red light to a flashing amber on a pelican crossing. And for a driver, a flashing amber means that if there's nobody in the process of crossing, you are allowed to proceed. Remember, when it's a flashing amber for you as a driver, it's a flashing green man for the pedestrians, and they're not supposed to start crossing. So as long as there's nobody actually in the process of crossing on a flashing amber, then you are okay to go ahead. But this isn't talking about pelican crossings. This is these ones here. Clever ones because they can see. They've got sensors on the cameras. Moving on. What should you do if you're driving a slow-moving vehicle on a narrow, winding road? Keep well out to stop vehicles overtaking dangerously. Pull in when you can to let the vehicles behind overtake. Wave the vehicles behind to come past you if you think they can overtake quickly. Give a left signal when it's safe for vehicles to overtake you. So this is a good question because this is the sort of thing that learners can very easily kind of trip up on. So we're driving a slow moving vehicle on a narrow winding road. So you look in your central mirror and let's say there's a whole load of vehicles behind you and they can't overtake you because we're on narrow winding road. So they haven't got enough vision to see when is it good for them to overtake. So it's always courteous in this situation to try and see if you can assist them. So how can we assist them? Keep well out to stop vehicles overtaking dangerously. Well, okay, that's got nothing to do with assisting anyone, is it? Wave the vehicles behind to come past you if you think they can overtake. Well, you know, we shouldn't be telling other drivers what to do, should we? That's just a general rule. You don't tell people to cross zebra crossings. You don't tell people to turn into a road. Someone who's facing you, you don't tell them, say on a crossroads, you don't tell other drivers to do things. Give a left signal when it's safe for vehicles to overtake you. Well, okay, I mean, there's potential there, isn't there? Give a left signal when it's safe for vehicles to overtake you. Let's bank that one for a second. Pull in when you can to let the vehicles behind overtake. That sounds nice, doesn't it? You know, that does sound good. This is a potential, but again, we're telling someone what to do. We're putting a left signal on. We're making the judgment here, in it, when it's safe for vehicles to overtake you. Let's go for this one here and explain the answer. If you're driving a slow-moving vehicle along a narrow road, try not to hold up fast traffic. If you see vehicles following behind, pull over in a safe place and let the traffic pass before continuing. Don't wave other traffic past. This could be dangerous if you or they haven't noticed a hazard ahead. Let's have a look at the highway code. Do not hold up a long queue of traffic, especially if you're driving a large or slow-moving vehicle. Check your moves frequently, and if necessary, pull in where it is safe and let other traffic pass. Be courteous to other road users. Moving on, you're waiting in a traffic queue at night. How can you avoid dazzling drivers behind you? Dazzling drivers behind you. So we use the parking brake and release the foot brake. Balance the clutch with the accelerator. So does the clutch and the accelerator, has that got anything to do with dazzling drivers behind? Not really. Keep your foot on the foot brake. Well, if your foot's on the foot brake, that means the brake light is staying on. So that's not good. And use the parking brake and foot brake together. Well, if you've got the parking brake as well as the foot brake, that means your foot brake, your lights are still on, because your foot brake is foot still on the foot brake pedal. So that's not really helping the cause either. So just talking that one, thinking that through logically, you've got using the parking brake and release the foot brake. That means your foot's off the foot brake, which means you're not dazzling the drivers behind you. So we'll have a bit of that. Explain the answer. In queue traffic, your brake lights can dazzle drivers behind you. If you apply your handbrake, your parking brake, you can take your foot off the foot brake. This will turn off the brake lights so that they can't dazzle the driver behind you. So look at this. You must not use any lights in a way which would dazzle or cause damage, cause discomfort to other road users, including pedestrians, cyclists, and horse riders. You must not use front or rear fog lights unless visibility is seriously reduced. You must switch them off when visibility improves to avoid dazzling other road users. In stationary queues of traffic, drivers should apply the parking brake, and once the following traffic has stopped, take their foot off the foot brake. That did to deactivate the vehicle brake lights. This will minimize glare to road users behind until the traffic moves again. This is a must not, so there's law behind that. You wish to turn right ahead. Why should you take up the correct position in good time? Okay, this came up in the study, didn't it? When we looked at it. To allow other drivers to pull out in front of you doesn't really make sense. We want to turn right up ahead. Why should you take up the correct position in good time? To allow other drivers to pull out in front of you doesn't really make sense. To help other road users know what you intend to do, I like that, because our position is in itself a signal, so that sounds good. To give a better view into the road that you're joining, excuse me, and to allow drivers to pass you on the right. So those two there aren't making a lot of sense. This one does, because our position is a signal to other road users, and sometimes if we're in the correct position as well, it enables other road users to sometimes, depending on the width of the road, to continue ahead, even if we're paused waiting to turn right. So this is looking good to me for that one there, because it helps other road users know what you intend to do. It reinforces you should have the right signal on, shouldn't you? It reinforces that when you get in the correct position. So this, if you wish to turn right into a side road, take up your position in good time, move to the centre of the road when it's safe to do so. This will allow vehicles to pass you on the left, potentially. Early planning will show other traffic what you intend to do, absolutely. And remember, when you move over to the centre of the road, you're not going over the white line, and there's normally a reference point that you can discover that enables you to know when you are at the correct position towards the centre of the road. It takes seconds to get that. So that's a handy thing for you to know, to cover when you're starting off your driving training. Well, before you turn right, you should use your mirrors to make sure you know the position and movement of traffic behind you. Give a right turn signal, take up a position just left of the middle of the road or in the space marked for traffic turning right. Leave room for other vehicles to pass on the left if possible. Yeah, nice one. You know, if you didn't pay attention to that last one, that could be that could annoy people, couldn't it? People could get very cross behind if you're preventing them from going straight on. And let's keep moving on. You're in a line of traffic. What action should you take if the driver behind is following very closely? Okay, so let's have a little look at this. We're in a line of traffic. We're driving in a line of traffic, and there's somebody behind who's driving, following you too closely behind. Ignore the driver behind and continue to travel within the speed limit. Okay, signal left and wave the driver behind to come past. Again, that's we're telling people what to do. Never a good idea. Slow down, gradually increasing the gap between you and the vehicle in front. Nice, like that one. Move over to a position just left of the centre line of the road. Well, we've just discussed that that's the position that you would be doing if you were turning right, didn't we? So we're not turning right. We're just travelling normally straight on the road. So I mean, this is what sometimes crops up, right? You get two good answers there. Look, ignore the driver behind and continue to travel within the speed limit. Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is, if they're driving too close behind you, that is in itself a hazard, because if you did have to make an emergency stop, or if you did have to brake sharply for whatever reason, then there's an increased chance that driver behind is going to hit the back of your car and shunt you forward potentially into a hazard. So we can't really ignore that fact. It is a hazard what they're doing, and we need to do something that gets rid of that particular problem. And this one here is good because we're increasing the gap between, we talked about this 2 second, the separation gaps. By increasing the gap between us and the vehicle in front, we're giving ourselves more time to respond to anything that should it crop up, an emergency or hard braking. We're giving ourselves more time and distance between us and the vehicle in front, so it wouldn't have to be quite so intense braking, which is going to reduce the chances of a rear end shunt from the vehicle behind. So it's interesting how these kind of questions crop up, and many of my pupils talk to me about these kind of things. And I said this now. Just try and think about what you're doing. That is a hazard. We can't really ignore that when somebody's tailgating us. So let's go for that. Let's explain it. If the driver behind is following too closely, there's a danger they'll collide with the back of your vehicle. If you stop suddenly, you can reduce this risk by slowing down and increasing the safety margin in front of you. This reduces the chance that you'll have to stop suddenly and allows you to spread your braking over a greater distance. This is an example of defensive driving. Yeah, defensive driving, like that. Let's have a look at this. Okay, nice one. So at the different speeds, the overall stopping distances. which is your thinking distance over here, followed by the red one, which is the braking distance, how long it's going to take the vehicle to actually come to a stop, and that gives you a total distance of stopping time. Very relevant if you think about it, this bit here, because if you do have somebody who's driving, here we go, that's a separation gap to 2 seconds, that's in the dry, yeah, 2 seconds. Because if you do have somebody who's too close behind you, imagine that red car was closer and only 1 second away. If you had to brake sharply, then there's only 1 second between the red car and the blue car, increasing the chance of them hitting you from behind. So what you do is you actually give yourself a bigger gap between you and the vehicle in front of you. Let's just read this through though, this is good. The stopping distance is drive at speed that will allow you to stop well within the distance you can see to be clear. So you must always be able to drive, but you must always be able to stop within the distance that it's going to take you. You know, if you did have to come to a stop, you must be able to stop in the distance for the speed that you're driving at. So, for example, if you're driving in a road where, let's say you're driving at 60 miles an hour and you cannot see 50 meters in front of you. So at 60 miles an hour, it's going to take 73 meters to come to a complete stop. But if you can only see, let's say 50 meters in front of you, what would that be? Things like fog, mist, or just no vision, a bend, for example. So you're defying that little rule there. Look, drive at speed that will allow you to stop well within the distance you can see to be clear. So if you can only see 50 meters in front of you, and yet at 60 miles an hour you know it's going to take 73 meters, then that's not good. You need to adjust your speed so that you are driving at a speed. If you did have to stop, you've got the time to do it, the space to do it. Just always be able to stop in a distance that is seen to be clear. You should leave enough space between you and the vehicle in front so that you can pull up safely if it suddenly slows down or stops. The safe rule is never to get closer than the overall stopping distance. Nice one. Allow at least a 2 second gap between you and the vehicle in front on roads carrying faster moving traffic and in tunnels where visibility is reduced. The gap should be at least doubled on wet roads and increased still further on icy roads. Remember, large vehicles and motorcycles need a greater distance to stop. If driving a large vehicle in a tunnel, you should allow a 4 second gap between you and the vehicle in front. If you have to stop in a tunnel, leave at least a 5 meter gap between you and the vehicle in front. So quite a lot there, isn't there? Quite a lot, but that's a good one. This is always worth. This rule here, by the way, is something that a lot of people forget about. I'm not talking about learners. I'm just talking about, you know, drivers. You must pick the speed that enables you to stop within a distance that you can see is actually clear. Got a little golden rule, that one there. Anyway, let's do one more. You're driving on a clear night. Which lights should you use if the national speed limit applies and there's a steady stream of oncoming traffic? Okay, traffic coming your way. So, do we want? We're driving on a clear night, so it's night time. Now, when we're driving at night time, do we want fog lights on? No, we don't, do we? There's no mention of fog. Do we want side lights? Do we want the parking lights on? No, we don't want those on. Do we want a full beam? You know, there's a steady stream of oncoming traffic. Do we want to be blinding those drivers in those vehicles? So really, just by process of looking around here, we're looking at dipped headlights, aren't we? Let's explain the answer. Use the full beam headlights only when you can be sure that you won't dazzle other road users as well. There is a steady stream of oncoming traffic, so that's no good. Let's have a look what the highway code says. You should always use dipped headlights or dim dip if fitted at night in built areas and in built up areas, and in dull daytime weather to ensure that you can be seen. I often say to people, if the thought crosses your mind whether to put your lights on, that in itself is a good idea to put your dipped headlights on, because the thoughts come into your head. But also look around and see what others are doing, see what the emergency services, have they got the lights, see if the bus drivers have got their lights on. If you're driving along and everyone's got their lights on but you, then just think about that. Are the street lights on? Because a lot of the street lights these days have got the little divides, the sensors on the top, haven't they? Keep your headlights dipped when overtaking until you're level with the other vehicle, and then change to main beam if necessary, unless this would dazzle oncoming road users. Slow down if necessary. Stop if you're dazzled by oncoming headlights. Okay, so I hope that's been useful to you. Are you sure you want to exit here? Yes, please. We got, oh, that's nice to know. I've got 13 out of 13. But if I've really just paused that because I don't want to make this too long, really. But I hope that has been helpful anyway.